Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. One of our most significant resources is our attention. However, with so many loud, flashing, and distracting demands, it's difficult to stay focused. It's more crucial than ever that we pay attention to it. Should keep a close eye on it and concentrate on what actually matters. What if you could start with a small step? Begin to work and live in a more focused manner. Are you looking for a way to increase your productivity while reducing your distractions? What if you had the ability to become indistractable? Let me clarify, because I have a Greek accent. Indistractable refers to how tough it is to be distracted from anything. It's difficult to divert your attention away from the task at hand. Have you noticed how engrossing the outside world has become? Have you ever sat at your computer with a deadline looming in the distance, and you were confident in your ability to complete the task, all of the items on your to-do list? After that, you take a seat at your workstation. 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, maybe you're still checking email an hour later. Or, for whatever reason, on that Slack channel. Have you noticed that when you're among your family, you're more relaxed? You're on your device for whatever reason, rather than being completely there with them? Alternatively, you may have gone out to eat with pals. Then have a peek around the room and everyone is reading through their Facebook news feed? What exactly has happened to us? Why have we become so preoccupied? Is technology, in fact, the cause of the problem? Is it possible that something else is to blame? Over the last few years, there has been a significant increase, and I looked into the source of the distraction. This unseen psychology at the heart of how businesses operate. Facebook, Twitter, Slack, and WhatsApp are just a few examples. We keep coming back to see how these things keep us coming back. But I wanted to do it so that we could all benefit. The same psychology could be used by product designers and enterprises to assist people in developing healthy habits in their daily lives. The book was written for the second reason, is that I became aware of my own actions. I didn't always comprehend how things were changing, and, to be honest, didn't always enjoy. I recall sitting with my daughter at one point, and we were able to spend some quality time together. We also have a book with a variety of activities, something both fathers and daughters might participate in. And one of the book's exercises was to pose this question to one another. If you could have one superpower, what would it be? Which superpower would you like to have? And I recall posing this question to my daughter. I know she responded, but I couldn't tell you what she said at the time. I wasn't paying attention because I wasn't paying attention. My phone kept drawing my attention away from the task at hand. I'd squandered a beautiful daddy-daughter moment. And it was then that I made my decision. I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. Of what keeps us from paying attention. The ability to become intractable will be the skill of the century. When we consider the workplace, where a large number of jobs are being mechanized, the jobs that will continue to exist and are worth doing are the ones that necessitate a certain level of human creativity, as well as the creativity that comes from paying attention. When it comes to our personal connections, loneliness, according to psychologists, is a serious problem. Is just as bad for our health as smoking and obesity. When it comes to our children, how are we going to teach them to concentrate just on one task at a time? And what type of example do we want to set? If what people perceive of us the most of the time is accurate, is the tip of our collective hats while we're engrossed on our cell phones. At the very least, we can rest easy knowing distraction isn't a brand new issue. Socrates and Plato argued about the nature of akrasia more than 2,500 years ago, and if these two Greek thinkers are to be believed, were having trouble concentrating, it's unsurprising that it's an issue. We still have them today. So, if we're going to get rid of distractions and grow uncontrollable, we need to delve deeper into akrasia's psychology. We have a tendency to do things in a certain way. Despite our better judgment, here's another way of looking at things. Distractions can be defined as activities that you engage in that pull you away from your true desires, things that are contrary to your better judgment. Traction is the polar opposite of distraction. These are the actions that propel us forward to what we truly want to accomplish. You'll see that both words are now capitalized. In the word action, traction and distraction come to an end, reminding us that traction and distraction are both important, are not events that occur to us. These are the things that we do. However, most individuals do not conceive about distraction in this way. Most people will say something to you along the lines of, "That major project was going to be mine, the phone rang, and I became sidetracked." But, when we say anything like that, what we're really saying is mixing up the terms external trigger, and internal trigger. Something about our surroundings compelled us in the direction of traction or distraction. What is more vital, however, is internal stimuli are more powerful than external triggers. These are the triggers that begin inside our thoughts. How can a trigger begin within our own minds? Well, it turns out that the brain works in a certain way. Allows us to perform almost anything. The homeostatic response is how this happens. Our brain's ability to maintain homeostasis is known as the homeostatic response. To encourage us to get out of a bad situation, I'll give you a couple of instances. You could put on a coat if you're cold. You remove it if you become overheated. You eat when you get hunger pangs. And if you're stuffed and it's not making you feel good, you put down your fork. As a result, everything in our lives is pre-programmed. As a result of these internal and external stimuli, if we're going to deal with distractions, we'll have to get creative. We need to start from the beginning. These internal distractions are the source of these distractions. So, ultimately, if we're ever going to get anywhere, to combat distraction, we must first address the source of the problem. This nasty, sticky, unsettling fact must be confronted. That we're seeking for a distraction because to get away from an unpleasant or emotional feeling. For many people, the source of their discomfort has now changed. Originates in the workplace. Let's put this to the test. If you won the lotto tomorrow, what would you do? If you win the $40 million lottery, you will never have to work again. Another day in your life, you'll be working for money. Do you check your work email on a regular basis? Do you have access to your company's Slack account? The vast majority of us would never check our work email again. The source of these internal cues that make us want to use, and these technologies are occasionally overused workplace triggers on the interior psyche. This isn't always a terrible thing, though. Many of us have a great deal of fun and satisfaction from our jobs. However, there is a certain type of work atmosphere that exists from time to time. That is what can cause these negative internal triggers. Recently, psychologists discovered that there are two factors that make it more likely in the workplace. There is a high prevalence of sadness and anxiety. These are the two conditions that make up a work environment that have a high level of expectation and a limited level of control. You may recall that there was once upon a time a famous episode, a scene from I Love Lucy, in which Lucy is folding up these miniature conveyor belt of chocolates, and she seemed to be doing okay at first. She takes a chocolate and wraps it in a small wrapper. She then sends them down the assembly line. Her supervisor, on the other hand, notices that she's keeping up. As she decides to increase the tempo, Lucy had to speed up on that conveyor belt. She can't keep up with them as they get faster and faster. As a result, she begins putting chocolates into every available space. That is an illustration of a working setting with a high level of anticipation and a lack of control. It's that kind of noxious working environment. This has been proven to be not merely linked, but also causal when it comes to anxiety and sadness, but to be the source of those afflictions. As it turns out, when we mix a hazardous work environment with other factors, we get with technology that keeps us linked at all times, we get some dreadful outcomes. It's known as the responsiveness cycle. It all begins on the first day of work. People arrive and have a look around, and they observe how accommodating people are by the use of their technologies. What is their email response time? When do they respond to the Slack channel? At what hour of the night? They understand that in order to advance, it is anticipated that everyone follows the same set of rules. It also makes us feel less in control. Just to keep up, you'll need liberty and creativity. The cycle then repeats itself. And the more of these tools we employ, the better. To stay in touch with one another at all times, but here's the thing, it's not the technology that's the problem. It's an indication of a more serious problem. Workplaces, we've discovered, aren't always conducive to success. That have a closed society in which people are unable to communicate concerning their issues with psychological safety is when challenges of overuse of technology are aggravated. However, this is a cultural issue, and culture can change. Here are several options for dealing with these signs of disinterest. To begin the process of transforming the company's culture, the first thing we can do is start a conversation. Even if it's only a few of your coworkers, regarding the issue of excessive usage of technology, the next step is to try on some clothes. As a result of these new regulations now, there's one thing I don't want you to do. To go embrace the tech use policy of another company. Don't just switch to no email Fridays on a whim. Or something along those lines. It's not a good idea. The goal is to foster an open culture, where people feel safe on a psychological level to talk about a variety of concerns that have arisen in the workplace. Try out whatever works best for your company, as well as for your team. That could imply that your first option, it's possible that your first idea for a new corporate standard will fail. This is an iterative process, so that's okay. We must manage distraction if we are to succeed. Find out how to deal with stress in a more healthy way. These internal stimuli. We've talked a lot about internal triggers lately. That start at work, but what about at home? The rest of the internal triggers something we have to deal with all day? How do we deal with loneliness, boredom, and exhaustion? Do you have any unpleasant feelings? According to psychologists, there are two options. We can either fix the problem or find solutions. To learn how to deal with adversity, let me share a few learning strategies with you. How to deal with internal triggers in a healthy way. The first step is to make a mental note of the sensation. According to psychologists, even giving a name can have a significant impact. To what we're going through right now, what is the underlying trigger that causes us to have these feelings? It has influence over you. The next phase is to become intrigued by the sensation. You know, a lot of people, when they're feeling something, they'll tell you about it. They don't want to feel anything, so they ignore it. They shove it down their throats. But, according to psychologists, this is not the case. It's not the right thing to do. That sensation should pique our interest. What causes us to feel this way, and what causes us to feel this way? We want to get away from boredom or loneliness. Whether it's pain, discomfort, or exhaustion, whatever it is, what exactly is going on inside of us? That's when we start to get curious. And we can do it with the third technique, is to conduct what's known as surfing the urge. Imagine yourself like a surfer, surfing the urge. That wave, that emotional agony, on a surfboard until it has passed. We can accomplish this in a number of ways. One thing psychologists tell us is that imagining that discomfort can help us feel better. The emotional condition, like a river leaf flowing by the 10-minute rule, is a tactic that I frequently employ. I allow myself to succumb to any temptation here. I don't mind if it's a diversion or a distraction as long as it's done in under 10 minutes. As a result, I set a timer for 10 minutes. I'm going to do what I wanted to do. Otherwise, it would have been a source of distraction for me. But I've got to get intrigued in those 10 minutes. I have to ride the wave of that sensation. I'll have to consider that for a few moments. And the technique's strength is that it works 9 times out of 10. By the end of the 10 minutes, 9 times out of 10, I can't remember what that sensation felt like. I've given it some breathing room. Now that we've figured out how to manage, let's move on to the next step. Our internal cues, and that this is essentially it's all about pain management when it comes to time management. The following techniques are related to how can we ensure that time is set aside for traction? You see, there's a basic question that needs to be addressed. At this moment, we must respond. Which is how we tell the difference in the moment. Between the things we'd like to accomplish and the traction acts, the things we'll come to regret in the future, what's with all the distractions? Distraction, you see, is a great deception. It makes us believe that what we're doing right now is the right thing to do. Even if it isn't, it is what we genuinely want to do. So, how do we tell the difference right now? What's the difference between traction and distraction? The only way to avoid this is to plan beforehand. When I chat to folks, I notice a pattern. They tell me about people who are having trouble focusing because of distractions. Oh, the world of days is so distracting, all of this technology is making it difficult for me to focus on anything. I can't get anything done because everything is buzzing around me. And I tell them, I'm sorry, and they say, I'm sorry. But what were your plans for today? What was it that all of this technology was diverting your attention away from? Do you mind if I look over your schedule? Something you weren't able to complete? They'll also frequently pull out their cell phone. They'll open their calendar app and see what's coming up. They'll show it to me shyly, and it'll usually be blank. It's all pure white. The truth is that we can't label something a distraction unless we're aware of what it's diverting our attention from. As a result, the only way to tell the difference between them is to compare them. The best way to avoid traction and distraction is to plan ahead. To do so, we can employ a psychological method known as defining a goal for implementation, which is just another way of saying plan ahead. What you're going to do, and when you're going to do it in today's world. If you don't schedule your time, you'll be left behind. Someone else will take care of it. Your boss, your client, your children, and Facebook, to name a few. Something is going to happen on TV, something is going to happen in the news, something is going to happen. If you don't set aside time for it, it will be eaten away. Your traction acts are the activities you desire to do. Every minute of your day should be planned out, in my opinion. Does this imply that you won't be able to do so on occasion? What if you go off the tracks and don't accomplish what you set out to do? Yes, of course. Is that to say we should berate ourselves? What if we don't finish what we set out to do? No, however, if you don't have a template for your perfect week, it'll be difficult to stick to it. Then everything becomes a possible source of distraction. To tell the difference between traction and traction, we must schedule the time in our day to avoid distractions. So there are a variety of options available to us. To make extra time in our day for traction, the first step is to plan your time, rather than your output. How long has it been since you last ate? On your to-do list with to-dos and you won't be able to finish them all and you simply postpone them until the next day, the following day, the following day? This is because you're focusing on the output rather than the input. And that input, which is the one thing over which you do have control, is the amount of time you devote to a particular endeavor. Also, make sure that task is budgeted in your weekly calendar. Now we can move on to the next step. Is to eliminate low-value labor. According to a study published in the Harvard Business Review, that knowledge professionals spend roughly 40% of their time is spent on low-paying jobs. This work that must be completed, however, you are not required to complete it. The good news is that we live in an era when this is no longer the case. There are a lot of things that we don't have to do. May be delegated to others through the use of technology. Alternatively, you can outsource services. Finally, we need to devote more time to concentration. As a result, there is less time for conversation. You see, we spend so much of our time at work. From all of these modes of communication, consider that for a moment. Every day, the average employee receives roughly 100 emails. Each for 2 minutes plus 2 one-hour meetings per day. There's only about an hour and a half left to do everything else in an 8-hour workday, things you must complete. What are our options for slaying the communications monster? Let me give you a few pointers. For more information on how to spend less time on email in particular, these days, it's the misery of everyone's existence. The first thing we want to do is to quit wasting time checking email over and again. That turns out to be the most inefficient use of time. All of the checking that comes with email and rechecking. You open an email, then promptly delete it. You double-check it over and over. You do it because you've forgotten something. What's in the email, and when it's due for a response. Here's how to deal with the issue. We simply want to glance at an email twice. We looked at that email for the first time we looked at it. We give it a name when it necessitates a reaction. In order for us to see it in our email inbox, which emails necessitate a quick response, and which ones can be postponed. I have two labels that I use. The first is a crimson one with the words "Today" written on it. The second is a yellow label with the words "This week" written on it. Then, when I have time on my calendar, I'll do it. To respond to email every day, I respond to the urgent ones. On my calendar at a specific time after that, every Monday, I have 3 hours. Mondays are dubbed Message Mondays by me. When I'm going over all those emails that can be postponed until the start of the week. That happens the following week. The key to receiving fewer emails is to send fewer emails. As a result, instead of responding to emails as they arrive, or whenever we're in the mood, instead, we should only respond to those that are urgent. Throughout that allotted period of time in our day, and by one time every week for non-urgent messages. In that block of messaging, well, I can't do that in my profession, some individuals say. I work in the service industry. I have to answer to emails as soon as possible. Okay, that's reasonable. However, there are other options available to us. To ensure that we still get in our focused work time, for instance, what if you only set aside 30 minutes in your day for 30-minute intervals of focused work? Few emails or text messages can't be answered in 30 minutes. Till you've got a chance to complete your focused, concentrated task prior to responding. You might also think about donating your phone to a reliable coworker so that if a specific individual phones you, you'll know who it is. And it's a time-sensitive communication, they will inform you and disturb you. The third thing you may do is to use Gmail delegation, which is a free function. This makes it possible for someone else to access your email account with limited privileges so that if an emergency arises, they'll know not to bother you. If you're expecting a specific email, arrives in your mailbox as an email, you and the other individual can barter this service. In order for you to check their email inbox when they're concentrating on a task, they'll reciprocate by doing the same for you. Now, one of the reasons that texting is so distracting is that it is constantly changing. Is as a result of all of these external factors, the pings, dings, and ringtones that annoy us during the day. As a result, they typically lead to distraction. If I were to ask you to name the 3 most common reasons, what would you say? In the United States of America, death is a common occurrence. What do you think they're going to be? The first 2 will be given to you. The first is heart disease, and the second is cancer. What is the third item on the list? If it were an illness, would you believe it? In the United States, it is the 3rd biggest cause of death. Is due to medication errors. Doctors and nurses are mistreating patients by prescribing the incorrect medication or the incorrect drug dosage. Every year, 200,000 Americans are harmed. Hospitals have been thinking this way for decades. This is how much it costs to run a firm. There isn't much they can do about it. Until a courageous group of nurses attempted to intervene to find out why so many individuals are being injured by this very avoidable blunder. What these nurses discovered turned out to be that when nurses are delivering medication, they are doing so in a safe and efficient manner. On average, they are interrupted during each dosage session. Repeat this procedure 10 times. As a result of which they are unable to concentrate and administering the incorrect medication to patients. As a result, they began to brainstorm various remedies. May be able to remedy the issue. They came up with a solution. This resulted in an 88% reduction in prescription errors. You'll never guess what the answer is. The answer was inexpensive vests. Nurses wear vests that alert everyone around them. Not to bother them when they're working that necessitates concentration and attention. All of these exogenous causes were ruled out. That they could concentrate on the task at hand, because when someone is interrupted when working on something important, they become irritated. They are more prone to making errors. So, how can we put the nurse's knowledge to good use? In order to avoid the risk of disruption, and how may external triggers be blocked? Today, many of us work in open workplaces, which are fantastic. In some aspects, but in others, it can be highly distracting. What if we began utilizing the screen symbol? To let folks know when we don't want to be disturbed, all those external triggers are being blocked out. Some of us are now able to work from home. For example, my wife enjoys working in our home office. Our daughter, however, frequently interrupts her. So she went to Amazon and discovered herself. The concentration crown is what we call it. It's a small cap that she can wear. When she has to focus on something, she turns on the light. It's impossible to miss when she's wearing it. It also sends a clear message to everybody in her vicinity. Especially to my daughter that she will not be disturbed. We can apply the same principle. On our devices in a virtual environment, as you may know, many of our devices include features that allow us to communicate with one another. To keep extraneous triggers at bay, there's a fantastic function on Apple products, for example. Do not disturb while driving mode is what it's called. This feature can be activated with just one button click. And whenever you get a phone call or a text message, they'll get an auto reply saying you're unable to react right now, but if it's critical, text the word critical back. And the message will be delivered. There are a lot of other things we can do now. To keep these extrinsic impulses at bay, for instance, if you work on a cluttered desktop, it's time to get rid of all those small icons and notifications. All the digital jumble, so you can concentrate on the task at hand. The same may be said about our cell phones. If your phone is clogged with apps and notifications, it's time to pose a simple question to yourself. Is this trigger working for me, or am I working against it? For instance, if you are prompted by an external trigger to do something you'd like to do, such as go to a meeting, take a call, go work out, and you're good to go. You're getting traction because of that external trigger. But if it's distracting you or forcing you to do anything, it's not worth it. It's time to make adjustments to something you didn't intend to do. Those settings for notifications, the figures are astounding. People who own a smartphone make up 2/3 of the population. They never change their notification preferences. That's insane. We can't even begin to describe how distracting technology is. If we haven't even spent the requisite 10 minutes to alter our device's notification settings, so that we can utilize these apps on a regular basis. In contrast to the app's creator's schedule, the very last thing we should do is wait to turn off this obtrusive technology outside of our meetings, both socially and professionally, as well as at our business meetings. If we're going to meet face to face, we must be present, both physically and mentally. What is the significance of this? Our devices, you see, can provide a second-hand smoke sensation. When you observe someone in a meeting examining their phone, you should be concerned. It also makes you think about checking your device. So we'll have to put these distracting devices away outside of our scheduled meetings, so there's one more strategy to consider. Things we might apply to our quest for indistractability. All that remains is the ultimate procedure. About lowering the chance of becoming distracted. To demonstrate this point, consider the following. I'd want to transport you back 2,500 years. Homer's Odyssey contains the narrative of Ulysses. This hero, Ulysses, had to sail his ship, leading the crew through the Sirens' Island. These fabled beings are known as the Sirens, that perform this song for anybody that hears it. Their ship smashes into the Sirens' Island, killing everyone on board. Now that Ulysses is aware of the threat, he does, however, plan ahead. He'd want to hear the siren sing, however, he is well aware of what will occur if he hears it. As a result, here's what he does. He makes a deal with his crew and orders them to tether him to his ship's mast and assures them that whatever I do, don't let me go, no matter what I say. What's more, you know what? The strategy is effective. He sails his ship safely past the Siren's island. So, what's the takeaway here? What can we take out from Ulysses' Pact? Well, it turns out that there are a variety of options. That we have the ability to create agreements with ourselves to reduce the likelihood of distraction. For instance, there's a fantastic product. The kitchen safe is what it's called. It's this small plastic container. On the top, there's a lock and a timer. And whatever you put into that machine, it will work. Let's say it's a box of donuts or cookies. Or, for that matter, your cell phone. You won't be able to access it as long as it's locked. At specific hours of the day or night, we can do something similar with our gadgets as well. I utilize a variety of apps on a daily basis. Making these packs will assist me in blocking out distractions. For instance, whenever I need to concentrate on something, I take out my phone and launch the Forest app. Forest is now pretty simple. All I have to do is type in how much time I want to focus, and that's it. As a result, a virtual tree has been planted. If I pick up my phone and do anything with it now, I'll be in trouble. That virtual tree perishes. It's just a silly little virtual tree. It's useless, but it serves as a reminder to me that I had made a deal with myself. There are tens of thousands of apps similar to this. The majority of them are completely free. A program called TimeGuard is one of my favorites. I can use TimeGuard to access apps and websites that might otherwise be a source of distraction for me. However, only at specific periods of the day. As an example, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., that is the end of my social media time. I intend to use Facebook or YouTube at that time. Or Reddit, or whatever you want to call it. It is something I have planned for. So I've taken what would normally be a source of distraction and turned it into a source of inspiration. Any moment during the day I've turned it into a traction act. That is precisely what I intend to accomplish. And this app assists me in removing all of those distractions. When it isn't that hour of the day when I give myself permission to utilize these services, so these are a few examples of how technology can be used to avoid being distracted by technology. People frequently tell me that they are the ones who give the least amount of time to the people they care about the most. What causes this to happen? I took an economics class in college and like it. And my professor explained it to me. That's something I've always remembered. The idea of a residual benefactor is central to the concept. The individual, the chump, is a residual benefactor who is responsible for whatever is left over after a business has gone out of business. The residual benefactor no longer exists. Make a good impression. And that idea has been with me ever since. I recall thinking, wow, I don't want it to turn anyone I care about into a long-term benefactor. That is to say, if you have people in your life who are significant to you, and they deserve a place in your home on your timetable as a result, making time for traction is essential. Is quite significant. I like to break down how we spend our time. There are 3 primary spheres. You have time in the center sphere. You can't be in good physical and mental shape if you're not in good physical and mental shape. It's quite difficult for you to look after yourself, as well as to love people and to put forth your best effort. Outside of you, the next sphere, those who are significant in your life, your neighborhood, your friends, and your family are all important to you. Then there's your work, which is the final sphere, as well as your professional obligations. As a result, for each of these spheres, we must set up time in our day to do so. We should begin with ourselves. Is there enough time for us to sleep? Listening to audiobooks for intellectual sustenance, enhancing our lives by watching stuff we like. Physical activity, in other words. All of that would fall under your sphere of influence. Then we have to schedule time. For the sake of the people who matter most to us. As a result, they aren't residual benefactors. Finally, we must set aside time. For all of our work responsibilities, all of the things we have to do to ensure that we are safe in our daily lives, that our professional lives are heading in the correct direction. The majority of folks do it backwards. They must first fulfill all of their professional commitments. Then they abandon whatever is left to the individuals that matter most in their lives. But of course, there is a simple answer. To take into account these three circles, first and foremost, we must ensure that we have enough time. First and foremost, for ourselves, and then for the people who we cherish the most in our life. So, as I'm sure you've been told numerous times, that you are unable to multitask, that isn't quite correct, and I'm here to tell you why. You can, in fact, multitask. Task switching is something you can't do properly. When we go from one activity to the next, we are said to be task switching. To the following as a result, our concentration suffers. And there are times when we aren't as productive as others. We'd be in the same situation if we only tackled one assignment at a time. Multitasking is a unique skill. You can, in fact, multitask. In reality, multitasking can help you get more done. This is referred to as temptation bundling. And what we discover is that when we take something we want to do, it becomes a lot easier. Something that is a reward in one setting, but not in another, and we pair it with something else that we truly don't want to do, we can truly boost our motivation levels to engage in that conduct that we didn't really want to engage in. For instance, when I go to the gym, I'm not a big fan of working out, but in order to encourage me to go to the gym, I listen to podcasts, books, and audiobooks, among other things. Something I enjoy, and which provides me with additional drive in order to make that activity more pleasurable. Multitasking is what I'm doing. What matters is that you are able to multitask. As long as the channels are different. You couldn't, for example, watch 2 television channels at the same time. Are you utilizing the visual interface at the same time? On 2 channels, you can't have 2 streams of information. In the same way, 2 audiobooks cannot be listened to at the same time. You can't work on 2 math problems at once. However, if you switch up the interfaces, you'll get a better result. So that you can, for example, have a visual interface listening to music through the oral interface, or seeing a movie, while engaging in some form of physical exercise. Multitasking can be fruitful in this case. It is a fantastic approach to make the most of our time. When a contract is broken, some people become enraged. They take it extremely seriously, as we all do. They are having a hard time getting back on track. Self-compassion is the answer to this dilemma. People who are more self-compassionate have higher self-esteem, according to studies. Are more likely to achieve their long-term objectives. So, how do we develop self-compassion? One way, according to studies, is to talk to ourselves. As if we were conversing with a beloved buddy. If I told you about my condition, you'd think I was crazy. I was on my phone when I became distracted. I truly wanted to be with my daughter, but I couldn't. I'm guessing you wouldn't say anything to me about how horrible a father I am. Or that there is a problem with me. So, why do we converse with ourselves in this manner? Why are we so hard on ourselves? Rather, we should practice self-compassion. And speak to ourselves as we would to others, with genuine love. To a wonderful friend, it would be equally unhelpful if you told me, "Oh, don't blame yourself. This technology, you see, is designed to be addicting. There's nothing you can do about it, it's seductive." That would likewise be ineffective. The solution, as you can see, is to employ the 4 tactics. As we already discussed in concert, by controlling these internal triggers, you can, by setting out time for traction, by reversing the external triggers. Finally, pacts are used to create distractions. It's less likely to happen. Let me tell you what happened. You see, following the completion of this course, I got down with my kid and asked her a question. What superpower would she choose? And I told her, look, I'm truly sorry, I added. I wasn't paying attention the first time you mentioned something. Which superpower would you like to have today? Here's what she had to say. She stated that if she had the power, she would use it to always be kind. That's exactly what she said, to be honest. I wasn't expecting it. But the more I thought about it, the less I liked it. I understood that kindness isn't all it's cracked up to be. A superpower to be reckoned with. I mean, don't we all have the ability to be kind? The same is true when it comes to dealing with distractions. That we all have the ability to divert others. In its proper spot according to research, the number one factor that determines whether or not someone will be able to meet their belief in their long-term objectives, it is within one's own power to do so. As a result, when we use the term addictive, we are referring to, and that it's taking over our minds, what we're doing is enhancing its capabilities. As well as more credit than it is due. You see, we all have the ability to make a difference. To keep yourself from becoming distracted, we all have the ability to become indistractable. Thank you for your time and consideration, and best wishes. Because the speed of modern life is only going to pick up, as well as the number of technical entanglements is only going to become worse, it's up to us to keep up. Control our surroundings, which includes using our devices to establish limits. We have more power to do this. Then we realize, and when we take action, we can make a difference. Everything improves when you become indestructible. From our capacity to connect with others to our performance. As well as the bigger picture of our life. Now that you've realized how much power you actually have, I'm hoping you'll commit to defeating the forces of destruction. To creating durable habits of your own. There's no better time than now to make tiny adjustments. That can have a significant impact on your career and personal life. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.